What's up, guys? Welcome back to Command Point. My name's Ryan. Today I got Shane with me, and we're going to go through some Kill Team myths and misconceptions. Shane, what do you have to start us off with?
So I've got one that is a little bit faction specific, and by a little bit I mean it is just blatantly faction specific. So this is orc related. So this is something for all of the orc players to keep in mind, and it is also something for anybody that will ever play against orcs to keep in mind. This is in my opinion a pretty heinous myth. Um, the myth being flamers are good versus orcs. So I want to make one thing clear. Flamers aren't terrible against orcs, but they really aren't the like people see orcs as this horde, um, kind of like you would look at like a gaunt horde almost. And they want to take flamers against it because there's a lot of like a melee horde vibe going on. But there's a few reasons why flamers don't actually perform that well against orcs when you actually put the models down on the board. For starters, strength 4 versus toughness 4, especially against something like a knob, you'd much rather have a plasma gun than a flamer. Um, the issue with it is, first of all, its strength 4 versus toughness 4 is not great. The knobs are going to have a 4 up save. And yeah, an Orc Boy has a 6 up t shirt save, but still, strength 4 versus toughness 4 can get pretty dicey, especially with a d6 auto hitting weapon where you can roll a 1 or a 2, and then next thing you know, you might not even get a wound through. But the biggest reason I think that flamers aren't good against orcs is because orcs, they reroll charges base. That means that a charge outside of 8 inches is actually pretty safe for an orc, especially when you start factoring in Evil Sons, which is the main subfaction that a lot of orc players take. A charge outside of flamer range is not only is it good odds, but it's very good odds. Like it starts to become like really what you're doing is you're limiting your threat range. So I guess what kind of weapons are good against orcs? I think heavy bolters really good against orcs. Like a hot shot volley gun, really good against orcs. If you're facing up against knobs, I mentioned earlier, plasma is a really good option. But do not lean too heavily into flamers when you're playing against orcs.
Okay, so one myth that I've come across a few times, and I'm kind of guilty of perpetuating this, is that bolt guns are useless. And this is specifically for Space Marines. What we've discovered is that Space Marines can take all these super fancy weapons in place of their bolt guns. They can just swap them out. But you should never underestimate the effectiveness of a Strength 4, even AP 0 or AP 1 uh, a weapon. There's a lot of toughness 3 factions in this game, like Adeptus Mechanicus, Asuryani, Drakari, who are vulnerable to lots of strength 4 shots. It just takes advantage of them. And so those weapons definitely have a niche in certain matchups. Shane, in the Bay Area tournament simulation, almost half of your Space Marine roster was just Blood Angels armed with chain swords and bolt guns, essentially, or some kind of bolter weapon, because that part of your list was specifically crafted to counter those toughness 3 factions. So never underestimate the Space Marine bolter.
Yep, yeah, big fan of the bolter. It's the best part about it is it lets you save points and bring other things like other models, other like you can load up your list a little bit more, and you're still wounding on threes all over the place. So yeah. All right. So next myth that I wanted to talk about. This is something that has driven me crazy since we started playing this game, and it became an especially annoying thing to read after Elites dropped. And that is this model. So you could just put blank right there. Blank is too expensive. It's really what it ends up being is kind of a blanket statement that players will use when they're list building to justify not taking a model that has a higher points cost. And a lot of this was a carryover from, before Elites came out. I mean, look at the best factions competitively. It was Tyranids, where it was basically just a swarm of gaunts. Like 90% of the models were 3 points or 4 points. Um, Death Guard was one of the best teams where you're spamming 3 point Poxwalkers. I mean, Guard, you were just spamming guardsmen with special weapons, and it was really all about bodies. And then elites came out, and people started looking at Terminators. They started looking at the Eldar Wraith Guards and Wraith Blades and all sorts of elite models, and they started saying, these things are they're too expensive, and I would never take them. And still to this day, people say stuff like this, like all the time. It is this like people are really afraid of putting in the points onto a list to bring a beefy model. And then I mean, you look back and before LVO 2020, nobody would have considered Wraith Guards for Eldar to be viable. And then Michael T. Holy ran a Wraith Guard in just about half of his games at that tournament, and it ended up being a major piece for him. Um, and I think the same rings true for a lot of the more elite units. You just need to find the scenarios in which they're good. And oftentimes, when they are good, they are a game winner for you. So don't just write off models because of points costs, because to just say that you don't want to take something because it's expensive, it's a really limiting mindset, I think, when it comes to list building.
Yeah. So my next myth, or I guess misconception more so, is that I guess 40K in general, but we're talking about kill team here. So that kill team, it's just too expensive. It's really not. There are tons of YouTube channels out there that have made videos talking about the cheapest kill teams that you can get started with. Death Guard are there, Death Watch are there, Grey Knights are a great budget faction. There's This is the lowest barrier to entry in terms of cost for entering the 40K hobby. What it comes down to most in terms of expense is probably the time. Time is the biggest investment for Kill Team and for 40K, and basically any other hobby. If you if this is something that you want to get into and you're interested by it, and you know you're willing to, I guess, not really put in the time, but if you think you have the time to enjoy it, then you really don't have an excuse. All hobbies are expensive when you think about it. Every hobby has expenses. In the grand scheme of things, I think that hobbying and wargaming is probably on the cheaper side.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I wouldn't have gotten into 40K if it wasn't for Kill Team and just the affordability of it. Okay, last one on the list here for today. This is another faction specific one that I wanted to talk about, and that is the myth that Tau is bad on Arena. And I think we have seen over and over and over again results from Tau players on Arena or on Arena tournaments, or even like split tournaments. Tau is perfectly capable of dominating on the format. They just play it differently than they do on Open, and I think it comes down to the player's ability to adapt to that changing environment, to that changing board that you're playing on. I mean, you could take a look right now at like Biranid is running Tau in the World Wide Open, and this tournament is half Open, half Arena. But including his Arena games, I mean, he's undefeated, and not one of his games have been close. And he's been playing against melee teams and teams like Drakari that are really good at like just about everything. So, and I think this is kind of an overarching issue where people kind of overvalue melee in the close confines boards like Arena. Not that melee isn't good, not that melee isn't better there than it is on Open, but sometimes that kind of hype spills over into stuff like saying that Tau are a bad team on Arena, or like because they're a shooting team and they don't have any melee capabilities. The truth is, Tau can spam 7-point shield drones that can plug doorways, and the types of things that are going to kill those drones are always going to be more expensive than the drone. It's going to have to be. So you're like putting your your you're basically using points on your list to get tied up with things that are a lot less valuable for the Tau player. And on top of the fact that they can do that, they just have so much mobility. They have 8-inch movement. They have fly. Fly is amazing on Arena, by the way. That should be one of the biggest takeaways here. If you have a model that can fly, you have a lot more flexibility on Arena, just being able to go over other models and get through tight hallways without having to necessarily kill everything in your path. But yeah, tower really good on arena. Shooting teams are perfectly capable of being good on arena. It mostly comes down to, what is your team's like movement capabilities, how many bodies can you take, and how well can you actually use those bodies.
And with that, we're going to wrap up our Kill Team myths and misconceptions videos here. Let us know in the comments below what you guys thought. Subscribe if you haven't, it helps the channel grow. And thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon for making all these videos that we produce worth it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again in the next one.